What if I told you that one of the clearest statements about leadership this year didn't come from a podium, didn't come with flashing cameras, and didn't come wrapped in political language at all? It happened quietly, in the cold, surrounded by everyday people, in a moment so simple that most leaders would overlook it entirely. No speech, no announcement, no performance, just presence. And sometimes, presence says more than power ever could. Picture this for a moment. A cold Canadian evening. Families bundled up in winter coats, children laughing, hands wrapped around sticks, watching marshmallows slowly turn golden over a fire. There's no stage, no security theater, no sense that anyone is on display. And standing right there among them is the Prime Minister of Canada, not acting like a leader above the crowd, but like someone who belongs in it. Laughing, joking, making sure the kids get their marshmallows first, just being there. That scene may look small, almost insignificant. But in reality, it speaks volumes about what leadership can look like when it's grounded in humanity instead of ego. Because nothing about that moment felt forced. Nothing felt calculated. There was no script to memorize, no image to project. It was simply a human being showing up as himself, and people felt it immediately. In a world where politics often feels loud, cold, and performative, moments like this land differently. They don't demand attention, they earn it. And that's what makes them powerful. The leader in that scene wasn't trying to convince anyone of anything. He wasn't selling a policy or defending a position. He wasn't performing strength. He was expressing comfort. And comfort builds trust in ways power never can. Leadership isn't just about the decisions you make behind closed doors. It's about how people feel when you enter a space. Do they tense up? Or do they relax? Do they feel guarded? Or do they feel seen? That emotional response tells you everything you need to know about the kind of leader someone is. What stood out most in that moment wasn't authority. It was ease. The ease of someone who doesn't need to dominate a room to lead it. The ease of someone who understands that respect isn't demanded, it's generated. And people noticed. Not analysts, not commentators. Ordinary Canadians. You didn't have to interpret the reaction. You could read it directly in their words. People weren't talking about economic credentials or political strategy. They were talking about how normal it felt, how refreshing it felt. Someone wrote that it was nice to see a normal human being as Prime Minister. Think about that for a second. Not powerful, not intimidating, not larger than life, just human. And somehow, that meant everything. Another person pointed out how genuine the smile felt. Not practiced, not rehearsed. Genuine. And in a time where so many public figures feel emotionally distant or constantly on, that kind of sincerity stands out. Because you can't fake warmth for long. People feel the difference immediately. Others connected that same warmth to how this leader treats people on the world stage. Respect, decency, calm. They weren't separating the campfire moment from diplomacy, they were linking them together. Because character doesn't switch on and off. Kindness isn't a costume you put on for certain situations. It's a pattern. And when people start recognizing a pattern, trust begins to form. Trust is a rare currency in politics. And once it's built, it doesn't come from grand gestures. It comes from consistency. From small moments repeated again and again. Moments where a leader listens instead of lectures, stays instead of rushing off, kneels down instead of towering over, speaks softly when softness is needed, and firmly when firmness is required. People weren't just seeing a prime minister. They were seeing a person, a husband, a member of a family, someone who felt grounded in real life, not insulated from it. And that matters more than many realize. Because when people see humanity in their leaders, they're more willing to believe in their decisions, even when those decisions are hard. Now place that image beside another very familiar style of leadership. One defined by volume instead of calm, by confrontation instead of connection, by dominance instead of dignity. A style where tension enters the room before the leader even speaks, where allies brace themselves instead of leaning in, where leadership is measured by who is defeated rather than who is brought together. The contrast is striking. On one side, a leader whose strength comes from emotional maturity, whose confidence doesn't need to announce itself. On the other, a figure who thrives on conflict, who fuels division as proof of power. One builds trust quietly, the other demands loyalty loudly. While one leader spends time creating warmth, the other spends time escalating hostility. While one focuses on making people feel safe and included, the other often leaves people feeling exhausted and defensive. And the world responds accordingly. One approach draws respect and cooperation. The other generates resistance and fatigue. Leadership isn't just about winning arguments. It's about setting a tone. And tones spread. Calm spreads. Anxiety spreads too. A leader who enters a room with ease lowers the temperature. A leader who enters with aggression raises it. And over time, that difference shapes entire nations, alliances, and global relationships. That's why the campfire moment matters. Not because of marshmallows, not because of a holiday outing, but because it reflects a deeper truth about how leadership can feel. It shows that power doesn't have to be cold. Authority doesn't have to be distant. Strength doesn't have to shout, and it wasn't a one-off. People have seen this same approach again and again. In moments of celebration, yes, but also in moments of difficulty. When communities were hurting, when soldiers needed recognition, when people needed reassurance more than rhetoric. The same calm presence, the same respect, the same willingness to engage as a human first and a leader second. That consistency is what separates image from identity. Anyone can manufacture a moment. Very few can sustain a pattern. And Canadians are starting to recognize that difference. They aren't just watching leadership, they're experiencing it. At a time when many people feel burned out by politics, tired of constant outrage and emotional whiplash, moments like this feel grounding. They remind people that leadership can still be decent, that kindness can still exist alongside power, that authority doesn't have to come at the expense of humanity. Because in the end, leadership isn't remembered for the noise it makes. It's remembered for the way it makes people feel. Years from now, most speeches will be forgotten. Most arguments will fade. But the feeling of being seen, respected, and included lasts. And maybe that's the real message behind that quiet evening by the fire. While some leaders burn bridges, others build warmth. While some create tension, others create trust. And in a world that feels increasingly divided and anxious, that difference matters more than ever. If moments like this remind you that leadership can still feel human, that power doesn't have to be cruel, and that calm can be stronger than chaos, then you're not alone. And if you want to keep seeing the side of leadership that brings people together instead of pushing them apart, make sure you stay connected. Because stories like this aren't just about politics. They're about the kind of future people want to believe in.